Hey everyone, today we're diving into the fascinating story of the Persian Empire, starting with its origins and the rise of one of history's greatest leaders, Cyrus the Great. So let's go back to around 1000 BCE. The Iranian people, who were part of the larger Indo-European group, started moving down into central Iran. These groups included tribes like the Medes, Parthians, Sogdians, and of course, the Persians. By the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, the Persians were pushing southwest, where they ran into the Elamite kingdom. Now, the Elamites had been around for over 2,000 years, but by this time, they were weakened and fragmented. The story of how the Persian Empire started is a bit muddled, but here's the gist. The Persians, led by the Achaemenid family, managed to take control of the city of Anshan from the Elamites sometime in the mid-7th century BCE. This small kingdom didn't play a huge role in the fall of the Assyrian Empire, but these events did set the stage for the rise of another Iranian tribe, the Medes, who quickly became a major power in the region. Their king even took on the title, King of Kings, and the Achaemenid rulers of Anshan became their vassals. However, they weren't just any vassals, they were quite prominent, as shown when Cambyses, an Achaemenid ruler, married a Mede princess. Fast forward to around 559 BCE, when a game-changing figure named Cyrus the Great took over as the vassal king of Anshan. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Cyrus rebelled against his grandfather-in-law, the Mede king Astyages, in 553 BCE. After defeating him in 2 battles, Cyrus took control of the vast Mede Empire and adopted their title, King of Kings, to legitimize his rule. Cyrus didn't stop there. By 549–8 BCE, he had brought all of Iran and Armenia under Persian control, then went on to conquer Lydia and Asia Minor in 547 BCE. While his generals took care of the rest of Asia Minor, Cyrus focused on expanding eastward, adding regions like Bactria, Sogdiana, and parts of Central Asia and northwest India to his empire. In 539 BCE, Cyrus made his grand entrance into Babylon, the capital of the powerful Babylonian Empire. With this victory, Mesopotamia, Elam, Syria, and Judea all fell under his rule. By 535 BCE, he controlled everything up to the borders of Egypt. After taking Babylon, Cyrus began to call himself King of Babylon, King of the lands. He smartly ruled his vast empire by keeping existing governance structures in place. For instance, in Babylonia, he maintained the local bureaucracy that had been in place for centuries. In other regions, like the Phoenician cities in Syria and the Greek cities in Asia Minor, he installed local rulers, known as tyrants, who, at the time, didn't carry the negative connotations the word does today. Where necessary, he allowed previous rulers to stay in power as long as they were loyal to him, while appointing Persian and Mede governors, or satraps, to oversee large parts of the empire. Cyrus was also known for his policy of religious tolerance. Although he likely followed the chief Iranian god, Ahura Mazda, and possibly even Zoroastrianism, he respected the religious practices of the peoples he conquered. He presented himself to the Babylonians as the chosen one of their god, Marduk, restoring their religion after it had been neglected by the previous Babylonian king. Cyrus even returned the statues of gods that had been taken from various Mesopotamian cities back to their original temples. He ordered the rebuilding of temples in Mesopotamia and Elam, and famously allowed the Jewish people to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. In the Bible, Cyrus is even referred to as the Anointed One, or Messiah of Yahweh. Cyrus clearly understood the importance of respecting the customs and religions of those he ruled. This approach earned him a reputation not just as a powerful conqueror, but also as a wise and fair ruler, even among the Greeks, who were often at odds with the Persians. In 530 BCE, Cyrus embarked on a campaign against the Masajdi tribe in Central Asia, who had been raiding the northwestern part of his empire. Unfortunately, this campaign would be his last, as he was killed in battle. His body was brought back to the capital city he had founded, Pasargadae. where he was buried. And after the legendary Cyrus the Great, the throne passed to his son, Cambyses II, who took the empire to new heights but also faced serious challenges along the way. So, after Cyrus's death, Cambyses stepped up as the new king. In 525 BCE, he launched a major campaign against Egypt, one of the few great powers left unconquered. He defeated Pharaoh Psamtik III at the Battle of Pelusium, took control of Egypt, and even had himself crowned as pharaoh. Cambyses didn't just rule Egypt from a distance, he adopted the titles and practices of a native ruler, trying to integrate himself into the local culture. Despite some claims by Greek and Roman writers, there's no solid evidence that he desecrated Egyptian temples. What he did do, however, was limit the amount of tribute these temples could demand from the people, which, understandably, didn't sit well with them. This, combined with the natural desire to break free from foreign rule, led to a revolt, which Cambyses crushed with a heavy hand. Cambyses spent the remainder of his reign in Egypt, but in 522 BCE, he got word of a rebellion back home in Iran. He set out to deal with it, but fate had other plans. Cambyses died on the journey, likely due to an accident. Now, let's talk about this rebellion. It's tempting to see it as an early form of Iranian nationalism, particularly from the Medes, who may have felt sidelined by Cambyses and his centralizing policies. The Iranian priesthood, known as the Magi, were apparently involved, and many Iranian nobles supported the uprising. However, the details are murky, and we shouldn't jump to conclusions. What we do know is that there was widespread resentment over the heavy taxes Cambyses had imposed. The rebels put a man named Gometa on the throne. To win support, Gometa granted the Iranians a 3-year tax break. He ruled for about 7 months before being overthrown in 522 BCE by a group of Persian nobles in a counter-coup. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, after getting rid of Gometa, these nobles debated what kind of government they should set up. They rejected the idea of a noble oligarchy, fearing it would lead to internal conflict, and also dismissed democracy as a path to chaos. In the end, they settled on monarchy and chose one of their own, Darius, to be the new king. Now, Darius the Great wasn't closely related to Cambyses or Cyrus, but he was a member of the Achaemenid family. His claim to the throne was quickly challenged, and the early years of his reign were filled with battles to secure his position. Rebellions flared up across the empire, in Elam, Sardis, Phrygia, Afghanistan, and Central Asia, and Darius had to put them all down. By 517 BCE, he even had to travel to Egypt to deal with unrest there. Once Darius had a firm grip on power, he expanded the empire even further, pushing into western India and Europe. He led a campaign to the mouth of the Danube River, aiming to challenge the Scythians, who were a constant threat. Although he didn't go deep into Scythian territory, he did manage to bring Thrace and Macedonia into the empire. Darius also tightened Persian control over the Greek cities in Western Asia Minor, known as Ionia, appointing or approving local rulers who were loyal to him. These moves set the stage for the famous Greek-Persian Wars. When the Ionian cities revolted against their Persian-appointed tyrants in 499 BCE, Darius's generals spent 6 years crushing the rebellion. The Greek cities in mainland Greece, especially Athens, had supported their Ionian cousins, which made Darius realize that Greece itself was a threat to his empire. He decided to conquer all of Greece. First, he reasserted control over Thrace and Macedonia, whose loyalty had wavered during the Ionian revolt. Then he sent a naval and military expedition to take Athens, but his forces were famously defeated at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. Darius died in 486 BCE, before he could renew his campaign against the Greeks. But not before he accomplished one of his most enduring achievements, the opening of a new canal in Egypt that connected the Red Sea to the Nile River. Darius is best known for his sweeping reforms that solidified the Persian Empire's administration. Unlike Cyrus and Cambyses, who had governed through a loose federation of semi-autonomous provinces, Darius decided to create a more centralized and organized empire. After nearly losing the empire following Cambyses' death, Darius understood the need for a strong, integrated system. He began by forming a centralized standing army that answered only to the king. At its core was an elite force of 10,000 Persian, and possibly Mede, soldiers, famously known as the Immortals. These troops served as the king's personal guard and ensured his direct control over the military. Darius then reorganized the empire into 20 satrapies or provinces, each governed by a satrap appointed directly by the king. These satraps were mostly Persian nobles or members of the royal family, and each province was further divided into smaller units with their own governors. Every satrapy had to pay a fixed annual tribute to the central treasury, an amount determined by a commission that Darius had appointed. To keep the satraps in check and prevent them from becoming too powerful, Darius employed a system of inspectors known as the eyes and ears of the king, who regularly visited the provinces and reported directly to him. To better control his vast empire, Darius improved the network of roads and way stations, making communication and transportation more efficient. He introduced a new silver coinage to facilitate trade, and standardized weights and measures across the empire. Darius also built and upgraded canals and underground waterways, further boosting the empire's economy. For his capital, Darius chose Persepolis, but he also established Susa as the administrative center of the empire due to its strategic location. Ecbatana, in central Iran, served as the summer capital. Like his predecessors, Darius practiced religious tolerance and even supported various cults and temples across the empire. Most notably, he funded the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Through these reforms, Darius laid down the foundations that would sustain the Persian Empire for nearly 2 centuries. And after Darius the Great, his son Xerxes took the throne, and with that the empire faced a new series of challenges and conflicts. So, Xerxes I, who reigned from 485 to 465 BCE, had his hands full right from the start. He inherited a rebellion in Egypt that flared up just as his father, Darius, was passing away. Xerxes put down the revolt with a harsh crackdown, ending any notion of ruling Egypt as a pharaoh. Instead, he absorbed Egypt into the empire as just another satrapy, stripping away its unique status. Shortly after, Babylon tried its luck with a revolt, but Xerxes responded with the same level of force, leading to its integration into the empire under tighter control. But the big task on Xerxes' plate was to finally bring Greece under Persian control. He launched a massive campaign in 480 BCE, one of the largest military expeditions of its time. However, despite his efforts, the Greeks were ready. In a series of fierce battles, both his army and navy suffered defeats, notably at Salamis and Plataea. These losses were a major blow to the Persian Empire, resulting in the loss of all its territories in Europe and triggering a revolt among the Greek cities in Asia Minor. This time, the Ionian Greeks were backed by the Delian League, an alliance led by Athens. The Persians found themselves on the losing side again, and after the Battle of Eurymedon in 466 BCE, active hostilities with the Greeks finally ceased. Xerxes' reign came to a sudden end when he was assassinated in 465 BCE in a palace coup. His son, Artaxerxes, then ascended the throne and reigned from 465 to 425 BCE. Artaxerxes I's early years were marked by a ripple effect of his father's violent end, leading to rebellions across the empire, particularly in Bactria and Egypt. The Egyptian rebellion took a decade to suppress, showing just how fragile the empire had become. Later, in around 455 BCE, another revolt broke out in Syria, adding to the empire's woes. Despite these challenges, Artaxerxes proved to be a capable ruler. Although he gained a reputation, possibly exaggerated, for being heavily influenced by his wives and concubines, he was a shrewd leader. He focused on weakening Athens, Persia's long-standing rival, by financially supporting Athens' enemies in Greece. This strategy worked to some extent, although when the Athenians responded by attacking Persian forces in Egypt and Cyprus, they didn't make much headway. Eventually, Artaxerxes negotiated peace with the Greeks through the Peace of Calais around 449 to 448 BCE. This treaty restored the pre-war status quo, with the Persians giving up their ambitions in Greece while retaining control over the Ionian cities. After Artaxerxes I's death in 424 BCE, the empire was thrown into a period of instability, marked by coups and counter-coups. Eventually, one of Artaxerxes' illegitimate sons, Ochus, managed to seize the throne, taking the name Darius II. He brought some stability back to the empire and pursued a policy of supporting Sparta against Athens. This alliance paid off when Sparta decisively defeated Athens in 404 BCE. But Darius II didn't live to enjoy the victory for long. He died the same year, and soon after, Egypt managed to break free from Persian control, remaining independent for several decades. Darius II's son, Artaxerxes II, succeeded him and reigned for an impressive 45 years, from 404 to 358 BCE, the longest of any Achaemenid monarch. Early in his reign, his brother Cyrus, the satrap of Lydia, rebelled with the help of 10,000 Greek mercenaries. Cyrus marched on Babylon, then serving as the imperial capital, but was stopped by the royal Persian army at the Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BCE, where he was killed. The 10,000 Greeks found themselves deep in hostile territory, and their harrowing journey back to Greece became legendary, recounted by one of their commanders, Xenophon. This story would later inspire Alexander the Great to question just how powerful the Persian Empire really was. Although Artaxerxes failed to recapture Egypt in 373 BCE, he was more successful in dealing with the Greeks. When Sparta invaded Asia Minor, Artaxerxes supported Sparta's enemies, which eventually led to a war among the Greek city-states. This conflict culminated in the King's Peace in 387 BCE, which recognized Sparta's dominance in mainland Greece while restoring full Persian control over the Ionian cities. Later in his reign, Artaxerxes faced a significant rebellion from several satraps in Asia Minor, which took a decade to suppress, ending in 362 BCE through a mix of military action, diplomacy, and compromise. Artaxerxes II was succeeded by his son, Artaxerxes III, who reigned from 358 to 337 BCE. His time on the throne was marked by constant efforts to hold the empire together as various regions and satraps threatened to break away. The Greeks, particularly Athens, were a recurring problem, but Artaxerxes III managed to force Athens into a peace deal in 355 BCE that significantly reduced its power. He also faced continued unrest on his Central Asian frontier and dealt with repeated rebellions from the satraps of Asia Minor and other western provinces. Despite ordering the demilitarization of these satrapies, his command was ignored, but by 353 BCE, royal forces had finally defeated the rebellious satraps. In 351 BCE, Artaxerxes attempted to recover Egypt, but his army suffered a heavy defeat. This loss sparked further rebellions in Phoenicia, Asia Minor, and Cyprus, which took years to suppress. By 343 BCE, with the help of large contingents of Greek troops, Artaxerxes managed to bring these regions back under control, although the city of Sidon was completely destroyed during the conflict. Undeterred, Artaxerxes III made a second attempt to reconquer Egypt, this time with a massive, battle-hardened army. He succeeded in defeating the Egyptian pharaoh Nectanebo with the Second Battle of Pelusium in 343 BCE, quickly occupying the rest of the country. However, Artaxerxes seems to have become increasingly ruthless and paranoid, particularly toward Egypt. He looted temples, raised city walls, and imposed heavy taxes, likely aiming to weaken Egypt so it could never again revolt against Persia. With the empire finally under his firm control, the remaining years of Artaxerxes III's reign were relatively stable and peaceful. However, one looming threat remained, the rise of Macedonia under its ambitious king, Philip II. Artaxerxes attempted to curb Philip's influence through diplomacy and by supporting his enemies. But in 337 BCE, Artaxerxes was murdered along with most of his family by his vizier, Bagoas. After a brief period of instability, during which Artaxerxes IV was also murdered, Bagoas installed Darius III, a nephew of Artaxerxes IV, on the throne. Darius III quickly turned the tables on Bagoas, forcing him to swallow poison. The final chapter of the Persian Empire began in 334 BCE when Alexander the Great, the young king of Macedonia, launched his invasion of Asia Minor. Darius III's forces were defeated in a series of battles, most notably at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela. By 330 BCE, the Persian capitals of Susa and Persepolis had surrendered. Darius III fled to Ecbatana but was betrayed by Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, who took him prisoner. As Alexander approached, Bessus had Darius murdered and declared himself the new king, taking the name Artaxerxes V. However, Bessus was soon captured by Alexander's forces, tried, and executed. Meanwhile, Alexander had Darius III's body buried with full honors in Persepolis, marking the end of the Achaemenid dynasty and the rise of a new era under Alexander the Great.